So the first thing about driving a manual, about learning to drive a manual smoothly, is to obviously shift gears smoothly, right? So we'll start with the basic stuff. If you're in a new car or you're new to driving manual and you want to shift gears smoothly, upshifting this is, what you want to do is, once you shifted up gear, you want to hold the clutch at the buy point just a little bit while putting some gas pressure on it. This will make sure your gear shifts are guaranteed to be smooth, okay? So clutch, upshift, hold the clutch for a bit. Upshift, I'm gonna hold the clutch at the buy point for a bit. That will guarantee a smooth ass gear shift, regardless of which car you drive, of whatever, right? Whatever, anything. That will guarantee a smooth shift. The next thing is how you actually want to shift gears, alright? In the manual, once you've driven enough, you'll realize that if you have a passenger by your side, when you are pushing the clutch down to upshift, to change up a gear, you'll find that the passenger lurch forward a little bit like this when you're pushing the clutch to upshift. The reason that this happens is simply because of how physics work, alright? When you're accelerating, the car is being pushed forward, right? There's a forward force. There's an acceleration forward. But when you cut off that acceleration, all of a sudden, the car is pushed backwards a little bit because you don't have that forward force anymore. But the thing is, the passengers, they don't expect that. They're not one with the car, so when the car stops being pushed forwards, it rocks back a bit, the passenger will sort of lurch forward in relation to the car. I hope that makes sense to you guys. So what you want to do is to minimize that lurching effect. What you want to do is, as you're accelerating and you know you're going to change gears, slowly let off the gas nearly up to the point where when you are pushing the clutch down to upshift, it's almost like you're already at a constant speed beforehand. You're not accelerating and then all of a sudden you let off the gas suddenly and you upshift, right? That will cause that lurch forward because the car is pushing the passenger and all of a sudden the car's not anymore, so the passenger still has that momentum, so they lurch forward a bit. So here, I'll show you an example. I'm about to upshift, I'm gonna let off the gas, and it's almost like I've been at constant speed before I upshifted. So when you do it smoothly like that, you're not abruptly cutting off the acceleration. You are rather smoothly transitioning to a constant speed and then you upshift. And when you do that, there will be no lurch or very minimal lurch because the car is almost already stationary. So when you push the clutch in and you upshift, the car, there's not really any acceleration changes to the car. There will be no force difference. The passenger will remain at constant speed with the car, just like how it is beforehand, and you'll shift very smoothly. You won't see the passenger lurch forward like this. Next thing is braking smoothly, okay? This is especially true if you're driving a manual. There is absolutely no excuse to not brake smoothly when you are driving stick. Why? Because when you're driving stick, as you are coming up to a stop, you're gonna have to put the car in neutral, right? And when the car is in neutral and you're rolling up to a stop, you have so much control over the car's, you know, kinematics, over the car's momentum. You can really control it. So when you're coming up to a stop, you have to, and I'm saying this is like a necessity for manual drivers, you have to perform a limo stop, a limousine stop. What is a limousine stop? A limousine stop is a stop where you don't feel that little jerk in the car as it completely stops. You'll probably find this with, I don't know, like grandma drivers or, you know, people that don't really care about driving, right? They'll drive and then they'll come up to a stop and they'll just keep their foot on the brake just constantly, and then the car comes to a stop and you get that little jerk, that little hitch, right? You don't want that. So how do you get rid of that effect? When you're in a manual car, you are in neutral when you come up to a stop. So you have full control over the car. As you come up to a stop, you'll feel that the car has a tendency to want to lurch forward a bit. You're gonna ease off the brake, and what you'll find is once you've eased off the brake, the car will it'll softly unload. You won't have that jerk. Here, look at this limousine stop. I'm about to come up to a stop and I just softly unload, just release the brakes a bit, and it stops really smoothly, no jerk at all. And this is a lot harder to do in an auto car, because if you let off the brakes too much, the car will get into acceleration mode again, because that's how automatic car works, right? As you let off the brake, it'll engage the first gear, and it'll start accelerating the car. In a manual car, when you come up to a stop and you ease off the brake, all that there is that's propelling the car is just its momentum. Nothing is pushing the car forward, not when you release the brakes. So then it's very easy for you to come up to a very, very smooth stop, because as you unload the brakes, the car won't just propel forward, it'll just slowly come to a stop, and as you release the brakes, you'll just feel the car unload its suspension and the brakes will be very smooth, and that's what's known as a limousine stop. It's much harder to do in an automatic car, and in a manual you have absolutely no excuse to not do it, okay? Alright, the next thing is downshifting. Downshifting is very satisfying to do in the manual. It makes you feel badass. It prolongs your brake pad's lifespan, and if done correctly, it has no harm on your clutch. But the issue now becomes, how do you downshift smoothly? And by downshifting, I obviously mean rev match. If you don't rev match and you just use the clutch to slip the car's engine to drag it up, drag the RPM up to a lower gear, that's decent, that's okay, but that's not really optimal manual driving, right? So anyway, how do you rev match? If you don't know what rev matching is, you probably should watch another video on how to do it. Assuming you already know what rev matching is, how do you do it smoothly? Well, what you should do, you want to overblip the engine so that the RPM is over what your lower gear's RPM should be. So for example, let's say I'm traveling 50 km an hour in 4th gear, and that's about 2000 RPM, right? In 3rd gear, that will be about 2500. But what I do is I would raise it to about 2800, maybe even 3000. And then I release the clutch as the RPMs are dropping close to 2500. So that when I release it, what happens is the engine's RPM already has a tendency to drop down back all the way to idling. When I release the clutch, the RPM is slightly above where it should be, but since it has a tendency to go slower anyway, it won't cause a jerk in the car because it's sort of going towards where it wants to be. And same thing with the clutch. When the clutch grabs onto the engine, because the clutch wants to alter the engine's RPM towards how fast you're traveling, but the engine's RPM is already going towards how fast you are traveling, because you're over revving the engine and then you're releasing it as the engine is lowering to where it should be. So it's not the same thing as, for example, if your RPM, you didn't blip your RPM high enough, and then you release the clutch. When you release the clutch, the RPM isn't rising to where it should be. It's sort of going down, but then you release the clutch and all of a sudden the engine RPM has to go up again because it's not as high as it should be. There are opposite things happening where the RPM is going down, but then the clutch is forcing it to go back up to how fast you are traveling. So let's bring back the example of the fourth gear to third gear. Let's say you're going from 2000 RPM and you want to get it to 2500 RPM for third gear, but you only blip it to, let's say, 2300. And then as you release the clutch in third gear, the engine RPM is going down. Maybe it's at 2200 now, maybe even 2100. And all of a sudden, the clutch engages the engine and is slipping the engine. All of a sudden, it's going down and then it has to go back up again. So then you see how that opposite tendency causes a little jerk in the car. It causes the car to sort of drag backwards and you feel that braking force. When you over blip the engine slowly is going back down to idle. So then when you release the clutch and it's just over 2500, the clutch grabs onto the engine and then it drags it down, but then the engine already has a tendency to go down, so it smooths everything out. There's not an opposite sort of motion happening that occurs in the case of under revving. You see what I mean? So that's how you rev match smoothly. You over rev the engine and then you release it as the engine is dropping to where it should be, and this will smooth everything out because everything is working in unison. You're not causing a abrupt jerk, or you're forcing the engine to do something that it doesn't want to do in the moment, and your rev matches will be a lot smoother. Now obviously you don't want to hella over rev the engine to the point where it causes you to sort of accelerate, right? But that's essentially it, and those were the few things that I wanted to show you to improve your manual driving endeavor. I hope this video has helped. I'll probably release a lot more videos, so stay tuned for that, and have fun driving. Make sure it drives manual smooth as fuck. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.